The second time I watched my teaching career get stolen, I was standing in a hallway that smelled like floor polish, printer ink, and someone else's ambition. Outside the glass doors of Northbridge Academy's interview suite, my name was printed on a white card and placed on the wrong chair. Not accidentally. Not by the secretary. Not by some tired administrator who had mixed up the candidates for the senior literature post. My name, Alara Wren, had been slid neatly beneath the portfolio folder carried by my younger stepsister, Maris Vale, as if my entire life could be reassigned with 2 careful fingers and a smile. In my first life, I had seen that card and panicked. I had corrected it, politely at first, then urgently, then foolishly, with tears burning behind my eyes, because the interview was supposed to be mine. The lesson plan inside that folder was mine. The recommendation from Professor Hales was mine. The 6 years of classroom experience, the student literacy program, the award-winning mentoring scheme, the winter holiday workshops I had run for free until my hands cramped from marking essays, all of it belonged to me. But Maris had lifted her chin, blinked those soft wet eyes she used like stage lights, and said, "Alara, please don't do this here. You told me I could submit it because you weren't ready." And everyone had looked at me. The receptionist, the other candidates, the vice principal, the 2 board observers behind the frosted glass. They had all looked at me like I was the unstable sister making a scene in a hallway, not the teacher whose work had just been stolen in front of her. That was the first day my name began to rot. By the end of that week, Maris had my post. By the end of that month, she had my students. By the end of that term, she had used my old staff login to alter assessment records, blamed the breach on me, and cried so convincingly at the disciplinary hearing that even my former mentor could not meet my eyes. The Board of Teaching Standards suspended my license, pending investigation. Northbridge blacklisted me. My stepmother called me jealous. My father called me difficult. Maris called me late at night, after everyone else had stopped answering, and whispered, "You always were good at preparing the stage. I just knew how to walk onto it." In my first life, I learned too late that Maris had been under investigation long before she took my post. She had forged practicum hours. She had accepted money from parents in exchange for guaranteed grades at her previous school. She had altered a struggling student's final mark after the student's father threatened to reveal her tutoring scheme. The board had revoked her license 3 days before Northbridge's appointment was formally announced, but the notice had been delayed because her former principal buried the correspondence. By the time the truth surfaced, I was already ruined. My students had graduated thinking I was a fraud. My father had died believing I had disgraced the family. The board quietly cleared me 2 years later in a letter so cold it could have been written by a machine. It arrived at the apartment where I was tutoring children online for half my old hourly wage, too tired to celebrate, too broken to answer when Professor Hales called and said, "Alara, I am sorry. We should have believed you." That same winter, Maris became Northbridge's youngest head of faculty. I remember laughing when I saw the announcement. Not because it was funny, but because there was nothing left inside me that knew how to make any other sound. Snow pressed against the window. My radiator clicked like teeth. My name had been cleared, but my life had not returned. Clearance was not restoration. Apology was not resurrection. A ruined reputation did not grow back because someone finally admitted they had held the knife. Then I woke up. Not in that cold apartment. Not beside the unopened board letter. Not with my phone glowing with Maris's promotion photo. I woke up 3 years earlier, outside Northbridge Academy's interview suite, wearing the navy dress I had donated to a charity shop after my first disgrace, holding the leather portfolio I had once lost, staring at the white card with my name on it resting under Maris Vale's perfectly manicured fingers. My first breath came in sharp. My second came quietly. And by the third I was smiling. Maris did not notice. She was too busy arranging her face into the expression she used before a theft. Soft regret, damp lashes, shoulders slightly rounded, as if she were already forgiving me for objecting. "Alara," she said, "I know this looks strange." "It does," I agreed. Her fingers tightened on the folder. In my first life, she had expected me to grab it. She had counted on it. The scene in the hallway had been bait, and I had bitten so deeply she never needed to explain the blood. She glanced toward the frosted glass doors, where movement flickered behind the panels. People were watching. They had been watching the first time too. Not by accident. Maris always arranged witnesses before she arranged lies. "I didn't want to upset you," she murmured. "But after what happened last week, I thought you might be too emotional to present properly." Nothing had happened last week except that I had refused to rewrite her personal teaching statement for the third time. I tilted my head. "Too emotional?" Her mouth softened. "You know how you get when you feel pressured." There it was. The first brick in the wall she planned to build around me. Unstable. Pressured. Emotional. Difficult. In my first life, I had thrown every brick back at her in front of witnesses until all they saw was flying stone. This time, I let the brick fall between us. "You're right," I said. Maris blinked. The hallway seemed to pause. Even the receptionist looked up. "You're right," I repeated, gently enough that anyone listening would hear humility instead of surrender. "This is a very important post. I wouldn't want my nerves to affect the students." Maris stared at me like I had answered a question in a language she did not speak. "You agree?" "I agree that the best candidate should teach the demonstration lesson." I looked down at the folder beneath her arm. My lesson folder. The one she had stolen from my desk at home the night before. "Since you're holding the materials, I assume you came prepared." Her eyes sharpened for half a second. There she was. Not the weeping little sister. Not the brave young educator forced to rescue a fragile older sibling. The real Maris, calculating how long a door would stay open before someone else saw the hinges. "I only wanted to help," she said. "I know." The receptionist's expression softened. Behind the glass, a shadow shifted closer. Maris lowered her voice. "Are you sure, Alara? Once I go in, I can't undo it." Oh, I knew. I knew better than anyone. Once she went in, she would sign the candidate attendance sheet under my assigned number. Once she signed, she would affirm in writing that her teaching license was current and unrestricted. Once she taught, she would demonstrate authority over a class of minors while legally barred from doing so. Once she accepted the post, every administrator who looked away, every board observer who failed to verify, every principal who preferred a pretty lie to an inconvenient fact would be tied to the same rope. In my first life, I had tried to stop the rope from tightening around my neck. In my second, I handed Maris the knot. "I'm sure," I said. She gave me a smile so quick and bright it almost looked like gratitude. Then the vice principal opened the door and called, "Ms. Wren?" Maris stepped forward. I did not correct him. That was the second difference. The first was that I did not scream. The second was that I let her answer to my name. The third was that, hidden inside my handbag, my phone was already recording. 3 days before the interview, in my first life, I had ignored an envelope tucked beneath a stack of mail on our kitchen counter. It had been addressed to Maris, stamped with the board crest, and marked confidential. I remembered it because Maris had snatched it up when I walked in, then smiled too widely and said it was about professional development hours. In this life, I opened my eyes at 5:42 that same morning, sat upright in my childhood bedroom, and wrote down every date I could remember before the memories blurred. The board letter, the missing folder, the hallway scene, the staff login breach, the parent bribe, the disciplinary panel, the name of the clerk who eventually told me the revocation notice had been issued before Northbridge hired Maris. Then I went downstairs. The house was still dark. My father's reading glasses lay beside the sink. My stepmother's ceramic tea jar sat beside the kettle. Maris's tote bag hung from the back of a chair, open just enough for the corner of a cream envelope to show. In my first life, I had respected privacy and lost everything. In my second, I photographed the envelope without touching it. The Board of Teaching Standards crest sat in the upper left corner like a seal on a coffin. At 6:10, Maris came down in a silk robe, hair pinned into soft overnight curls, and froze when she saw me drinking coffee at the table. "You're up early," she said. "So are you." She glanced at the tote bag. "Couldn't sleep. Interview nerves?" Her smile flickered. For you, maybe. My father entered then, tying his robe, yawning through concern. Ilara, today is important. Try not to overthink. Try not to overthink. That was what my family called intelligence when it inconvenienced Maris. My stepmother followed with the quiet glide of a woman who believed motherhood was a spotlight and she had been unfairly cast in the supporting role. Maris offered to come along for moral support. Isn't that kind of her?
Kind.
Maris had spent the previous night copying my portfolio onto a flash drive hidden inside a lipstick case. I smiled into my coffee. Very kind. My father looked relieved. He had always mistaken silence for peace. After breakfast, I went upstairs, locked my bedroom door, and searched the board's public register. In my first life, I had looked only after my suspension, when every search result hurt. This time, I typed Maris Vale with hands so steady they frightened me. Her name appeared. Provisional license, active. No restrictions listed. At first, my stomach dropped. Had I remembered wrong? Had fate changed? Had I been reborn into a world where the letter meant something else? Then I saw the date beside the last update. For months old. The public register lagged. I remembered that too. A private revocation could exist before the public portal changed, especially when an appeal window was involved or a school failed to submit confirming documents. The board was slow, but not blind. Bureaucracy moved like winter fog, silent and dense, but once it settled, everyone inside it became visible. I needed confirmation, so I called Professor Hales. He answered on the fourth ring, voice rough with early morning surprise. Ilara? Is everything all right? In my first life, I had called him after the interview, sobbing so hard I could barely explain. By then, Maris had already told him I was unstable. This time, I said, I need your advice about a licensing concern. Hypothetically. He went quiet. Good teachers know when a student stops asking for comfort and starts asking for law. Go on. If a candidate is applying for a teaching post while under board investigation, and if there may be a private order restricting their ability to supervise students, who verifies that before appointment? The employing school should. The candidate must declare it. The board can confirm status directly if requested by an authorized employer. What if the candidate lies? Then the appointment is voidable. Depending on the order, any teaching duties performed could trigger a separate breach. What if the school is warned before the appointment and ignores it? This time, the silence lasted longer. Ilara, he said carefully, this is not hypothetical, is it?
No.
Is this about Maris? The sound of her name in his mouth told me enough. He already knew there were rumors. I need to know whether a revoked license can be confirmed before it appears on the public register.
Yes.
Through the board's compliance office. But they will not tell you another teacher's private status unless there is a legitimate safeguarding concern. What counts as legitimate? A candidate attempting to teach minors while misrepresenting their license. I closed my eyes. There it was. A door, not open, but unlocked. Professor Hales exhaled. Tell me exactly what happened.
So I told him enough.
Not the rebirth. Not the future. Not the cold apartment or the letter that would clear me too late. I told him Maris had taken my portfolio, that I had reason to believe she was under board sanction, that Northbridge might be about to place her in front of students using my materials and possibly my identity. He did not interrupt. When I finished, he said, "Do not confront her in public." A laugh almost escaped me. I wasn't planning to. Good. Send me copies of your original lesson files, timestamps, emails, drafts, anything proving authorship. Then send a separate concern to the board. Factual.
No emotion.
No accusation you cannot support.
No emoción. Irrapat.
It sounded like a punishment. Now it sounded like strategy. Also, he added, if she attempts to present herself as you, document it. Quietly. I will. Ilara?
His voice softened.
Whatever this is, do not let them make you look volatile. In my first life, everyone had called me volatile after they lit the match. This time, I watched the flame and wrote down who held it. By 8:30, I had emailed the board's compliance office with screenshots of the envelope. a timeline of concerns, and a request for urgent verification before any candidate was allowed to conduct a demonstration lesson at Northbridge Academy.
I copied Professor Hales.
I copied myself at an address Maris did not know existed. I attached metadata from every lesson plan in my portfolio. I attached a photograph of my teaching philosophy draft written in my handwriting 6 months earlier. I attached the parent feedback reports from the pilot literacy program Maris had never attended because she said struggling readers made her anxious. Then I unlocked my bedroom door and found Maris standing outside it. Her hand was raised as if she had been about to knock. For 1 second, her face held no expression at all. Then the mask slid on. "Are you nearly ready?" she asked. "Mum says we'll be late." "I'm ready." Her gaze dropped to my handbag. "Big day."
For someone, I said.
She smiled because she thought I meant myself. That was Maris's greatest weakness. Not greed. Not cruelty.
Certainty.
She believed everyone else existed inside the story she had written for them. I was the frantic one. Father was the forgiving one. Her mother was the offended one. Northbridge was the impressed one. The board was the slow one. She never imagined the characters might read ahead. In the car, my stepmother spent 20 minutes explaining how to accept disappointment gracefully. "Even if they choose someone else," she said, checking Maris in the mirror instead of me, "remember that rejection can be a gift." Maris touched my arm. "Elara knows that. She's stronger than people think." In my first life, I had pulled away. This time, I patted her hand. "I'm learning." At Northbridge, the gates stood open beneath ivy-covered stone arches. Students crossed the courtyard in navy blazers and polished shoes, carrying laptops and coffee cups, laughing like the future had never been weaponized against them. Once, I had wanted to teach here because Northbridge had resources my old public school never had. A debate theater, a reading lab, student counselors, classroom libraries instead of photocopied extracts, parents who would donate entire wings if asked correctly. I had believed a place like that would let me build something beautiful. In my first life, Northbridge taught me that privilege did not prevent corruption. It only upholstered it. The interview suite was on the second floor, past framed portraits of headmasters who all looked like they had been born disappointed. The receptionist gave us candidate badges. Mine read Elara Wren. Maris took it before I reached for it. "Oh," she said, laughing softly. "Habit."
Saw the...
She pinned it to her blazer. The receptionist hesitated. "Ms. Wren." I opened my mouth just enough to let Maris see the possibility of disaster. Her eyes pleaded. Not with guilt, with calculation. I closed my mouth. The receptionist looked between us. "She's presenting first," I said, calm enough to sound like consent. "I'll wait." Maris released a breath, so small only I noticed. Then she leaned close and whispered, "Thank you." I wanted to tell her not to thank the scaffold. Instead, I sat down. When the vice principal called my name and Maris stepped through the glass doors, my phone was already recording inside the front pocket of my handbag, microphone angled toward the room. I could hear just enough. "Good morning, Ms. Wren." "Good morning," Maris replied in her sweetest professional voice. "Before we begin, please confirm that the work submitted in your portfolio is your own, and that your teaching registration is current and unrestricted." A pause. Then Maris said, "I confirm." 3 words. That was all it took to change the shape of the trap. For the next 40 minutes, I sat in the hallway and listened to her teach my lesson. She opened with my question. What does a narrator choose not to tell us and why? I almost laughed. Of all the lines she could have stolen, she chose that one. Behind the glass, students murmured. Chairs scraped. Maris moved through my discussion sequence smoothly at first, because she had memorized my notes. She used my analogy about a locked room and a key hidden in the wallpaper. She quoted the exact sentence I had written in blue ink beside the word unreliable. She even used the pause I had planned after asking students whether silence could be a form of evidence. But stolen teaching has a ceiling. It can copy structure, not instinct. A boy challenged the interpretation. But couldn't the narrator just be confused, not dishonest? In my version, That question opened the lesson. I had planned 3 pathways depending on student response: confusion, dishonesty, trauma. Maris had memorized only the main path. That's not really what we're focusing on, she said. The room cooled. A good class forgives uncertainty if the teacher is honest. It punishes falseness instantly. A girl tried to help. Maybe both. Like, she lies because she can't admit what happened. Maris smiled too sharply. Let's stay with the worksheet. The worksheet. My worksheet. My careful bridge between fear and analysis. She reduced it to a handout because she did not know why it existed. Through the door, I heard Vice Principal Lorne clear his throat. Then another voice, calm and unfamiliar, asked, Ms. Wren, could you explain how this activity supports students with processing difficulties? That would be the board observer. Maris did not know the answer.
Of course she didn't.
She had mocked me for adding accessibility notes. It's accessible because it's visual, she said. Could you elaborate? It has boxes. Silence. I pressed my lips together. In my first life, that silence had belonged to me. I had stood in the hallway trying not to collapse while she passed herself off as brilliant. I had believed the panel admired her. Now I understood they had been polite, not convinced. Maris survived the lesson because confidence can carry a body across thin ice if no one jumps too hard. When she emerged, her cheeks were flushed, but she smiled as if applause were still echoing behind her. They loved it, she whispered. Did they? She linked her arm through mine, before I could move away. Don't be bitter. I'll tell them you helped. Maybe they'll offer you a support role. A support role. In my first life, those words had cut me so deeply I forgot there were witnesses. I had hissed that she was a thief. She had cried. The vice principal had stepped into the hallway just in time to see me gripping her wrist. This time, I gently removed her hand from my arm. I hope they give you everything you deserve, I said. She mistook that for defeat. People like Maris always do. The interview panel did not invite me in. Maris had made sure of that by accepting my slot and claiming I had withdrawn. Instead, the receptionist handed me a form to sign. Candidate withdrawal acknowledgement, she said, awkward now. Ms. Vale said you were here as family support, but had decided not to proceed. Maris stood beside her, eyes wide with warning. In my first life, I had refused to sign and caused the hallway scene. Northbridge later described it as erratic behavior in their report to the board. This time, I read the form. It stated that I, Elara Wren, voluntarily withdrew before interview due to personal reasons. A lie, but not one I needed to fight directly. I took the pen and wrote, I do not consent to withdrawal. I am present and available. Another individual has entered under my assigned candidate name. Please verify identity and licensing before proceeding. Then I signed my name, dated it, photographed the page, and handed it back. The receptionist's face strained. Maris whispered, What did you do? I documented. Her fingers trembled. Only once. Then she turned toward the receptionist with a wounded laugh. My sister gets anxious about wording. She means she's supporting me. We discussed it as a family. The receptionist did not smile back. Because written words do something spoken manipulation cannot. They stay.
Viceprincipal l'urna amarja moments la té.
He was a narrow man with silver hair, a silk tie, and the polished impatience of someone who believed administrative problems were moral failures committed by other people. Is there an issue? He asked. Maris stepped forward. Just a misunderstanding. Alara's emotional, and I think she's regretting. I am not emotional, I said. Not loudly.
Not sharply.
Just clearly enough that the hallway quieted. I am requesting identity verification. His eyes moved from my face to Maris's badge. Ms. Wren, he said to her. Maris swallowed. My professional documents are under Vale Wren in some places. It's complicated. It was not complicated. It was fraud wearing perfume. Lauren's expression tightened. Perhaps we should step inside. My phone buzzed before anyone moved. One email. Then another. Then a third. I glanced down. The first was from Professor Hales. I have forwarded your concern to Compliance Director Sato.
Stay calm.
Record all written exchanges. The second was an automated acknowledgement from the Board of Teaching Standards. The third had no warmth at all. Ms. Wren, thank you for your urgent safeguarding notice. The board confirms receipt. An authorized compliance officer is contacting Northbridge Academy directly. Do not obstruct any candidate process. Preserve evidence. Do not obstruct. That sentence felt like a hand on my shoulder. I looked at Maris. She was still playing the old game, not realizing the rules had changed while she was teaching my lesson. So when Vice Principal Lorne said, Ms. Vale, Ms. Wren, please wait here while I clarify, I did not protest. I sat back down. Maris sat beside me, rigid now. For 5 minutes, neither of us spoke. Then she leaned close enough that her perfume turned the air bitter. You think you're clever, she whispered. I looked straight ahead. Sometimes. You'll ruin yourself again. Again. The word slipped out before she could catch it. My pulse did not jump. It settled. There are moments when evil reveals itself by knowing too much. I turned my head slowly. Again? She recovered quickly. You always do this. You always make things worse. No, I said. I used to make things loud. And now? I smiled. Now I make them official.
Her face changed.
Not fear yet. Fear would come later. This was irritation. The first crack in the spoiled child's certainty that the toy would break the same way twice. Lorne returned 15 minutes later, and his skin had gone pale beneath the expensive tan. The panel will continue deliberations, he said, not looking at Maris. There has been an administrative query. We will contact both of you regarding next steps. Both of us? Maris asked. Yes. But I completed the demonstration. Yes. I confirmed my qualifications.
His jaw moved once.
Yes. I almost pitted him. Almost. The thing about institutions is that they hate being deceived less than they hate being caught deceived. Lorne was already calculating whether this could be folded quietly into a paperwork delay. In my first life, he had helped Maris because the lie benefited Northbridge. Young, photogenic, cheap, grateful. In my second, the lie had become a liability before the contract was signed. He wanted silence. So I gave him paper. I'd like written confirmation that I was present and available for my scheduled interview, I said. His eyes narrowed. That may not be necessary. It is for my records. Maris laughed softly. Records? Alara, you sound paranoid. The receptionist looked down at the withdrawal form with my written objection on it. Lorne saw her look.
Fine, he said.
He wrote a short note on Northbridge letterhead. Candidate Alara Wren attended campus on the scheduled interview date. Interview process paused pending administrative verification.
Paused.
Not withdrawn. Not unstable. Not emotional.
Paused.
I folded the note into my handbag as if it were a pressed flower. In the car home, Maris cried. Not loudly. Maris never wasted tears where they could not be admired. She cried in perfect, quiet drops that slid down her cheeks while my stepmother rubbed her shoulder and glared at me from the front passenger seat. What did you say to them? She demanded. I asked them to verify candidate identity. My father gripped the steering wheel. Alara, was that necessary? Yes. You embarrassed your sister. She embarrassed herself. My stepmother twisted around. Don't you dare. Maris has worked so hard. You have always had opportunities. She has had to fight for everything. That was the family myth. I had privilege because my mother, before she died, had left me books, discipline, and a small education fund. Maris had struggled because she wanted things that belonged to other people and called the wanting pain. My father sighed. We can discuss this calmly at home. No, I said. The car fell silent. In my first life, I had begged him to listen. I had gathered evidence on the dining table, hands shaking, while Maris sobbed upstairs and my stepmother accused me of cruelty. Father had asked me to apologize just to keep the peace. I had apologized. The peace still buried me. This time, I looked at the back of his head and said, I will not discuss my career in a room where theft is treated as sensitivity. Maris made a wounded sound. My father flinched, but he did not defend me. That hurt more in the second life because I had expected it. At home, I went straight to my room. By then, the board had not yet revealed the license revocation. That mattered. If I exposed everything too early, Maris could retreat, deny, claim confusion, blame clerical error. I needed her to continue. I needed every person who had helped her to believe the old patterns still worked. So, I did something my first life self would never have understood. I waited. Waiting is not weakness when the door is locked from your side. For the next 24 hours, Maris performed innocence with exhausting dedication. She left tissues in visible places. She skipped dinner. She spoke to my father in a cracked voice just loud enough to reach the hallway. I only wanted to prove I could do something on my own, on her own, with my lesson plan. My stepmother knocked on my door at 9 p.m. and entered without permission. Your jealousy is becoming dangerous, she said. I was sitting at my desk, organizing files. Is it? You could have cost Maris a future. She did that before I arrived. What is that supposed to mean? I turned a page slowly. It means you should ask her why the board sent a confidential letter. For the first time, her certainty wavered. What letter? Interesting. Maris had not told her. I looked back at my documents. Ask your daughter. My stepmother recovered quickly. If you've been snooping through her mail, that is a crime. I photographed an envelope on a shared kitchen table. You vindictive little. Careful, I said and lifted my phone. You came into my room without permission. I am recording. She stared at the phone as if it were a snake. In my first life, she had slapped me that night, hard enough to split my lip. Maris photographed the injury 2 days later and claimed I had done it to myself for sympathy. This time, my stepmother lowered her hand before it rose. You are tearing this family apart, she whispered. No, I said. I'm refusing to be the thread that holds a lie together. She left. I locked the door after her. The next morning, Northbridge called Maris. I heard because she took the call in the kitchen, believing victory sounded better with witnesses. Yes, this is Maris Vale, she said, bright and trembling.
Yes.
Of course. I understand there was confusion yesterday. My father lowered his newspaper. My stepmother clasped her hands. I poured cereal into a bowl. Maris listened. Her eyes met mine once, sharp with triumph. Then she said, yes, I would be honored to return for a formal meeting with the headmaster and board chair. Her mother gasped. Father smiled, relieved enough to forget caution. Maris ended the call and pressed the phone to her chest. They still want me. Of course they did. Not the Board of Teaching Standards. Northbridge. That distinction mattered. Northbridge did not know how much the board had confirmed yet, and Lorne wanted control before compliance officers arrived. In my first life, he had called Maris privately after the interview too, offering to resolve the family confusion if she could provide clean paperwork. She had done so by forging a declaration and using my portfolio to strengthen her file. This time, he was inviting her back. Good. My stepmother hugged her. I knew it. I knew they would see her heart. Maris looked over her shoulder at me. They asked me to bring original documents. Bring all of them, I said. She smiled. I will. She thought that was a threat. I meant it as advice. That afternoon, I received a call from Compliance Director Naomi Sato. Her voice was precise, calm, and entirely free of comfort. I liked her immediately. Ms. Wren, I am calling regarding your safeguarding notice. Yes. I cannot discuss another educator's private status with you beyond what is necessary. However, I can confirm that your concern has triggered an urgent verification process involving Northbridge Academy. I understand. Did another candidate present under your assigned candidate name? Yes. Do you have evidence? Yes. Preserve it. Do not distribute it publicly. I won't. Were students present during the demonstration lesson? Yes. Were you asked to sign a withdrawal form?
Yes.
I refused in writing. A pause. The kind of pause that tells you a professional has just placed one fact into a structure and disliked the shape it made. Please send a copy. I already have. I see it now. Another pause. That was wise. A compliment from someone like Sato did not feel warm. It felt sharpened. Ms. Wren, I will be direct. If you are contacted by Northbridge and asked to attend any further meeting, you may do so, but I recommend you bring representation or a witness. Professor Hales has indicated he is willing to attend in an advisory capacity. He has. He contacted us as a professional reference, not as your representative. Still, his presence may be useful. In my first life, Professor Hales had been used against me. Northbridge claimed he considered me gifted, but emotionally intense. Maris quoted that phrase everywhere until it hardened into diagnosis. In this life, he was stepping into the room before they could invent his absence.
Thank you, I said.
One more thing, Sato added. Do not warn Ms. Vale about any licensing matter. My hand tightened around the phone. Why? Because if she is aware of a restriction and continues representing herself as eligible, that is her responsibility. If you warn her, she may later claim misunderstanding was corrected before any breach occurred. I stared at my reflection in the dark window. Never told her the board had revoked her license. In my first life, I had screamed the truth too early. I had tried to save everyone from making the wrong choice, and they had punished me for interrupting the choice they preferred. This time, the law itself told me to be silent. I understand, I said.
Good.
We will be present at Northbridge tomorrow. Tomorrow? For the formal appointment meeting. My heart gave one clean, hard beat. They told Maris to bring documents.
Yes, Sato said.
We know. After the call, I sat very still. There are different kinds of revenge. The childish kind wants the villain to know immediately that they have lost. It wants the gasp, the widened eyes, the instant collapse. That kind is satisfying in imagination and useless in court. The adult kind waits until the villain has signed their name to every lie. By evening, Maris was rehearsing her outfit in the living room. She chose a cream blouse, a fitted navy jacket, pearl earrings, and the modest gold pendant our father had given me after graduation. I noticed it at once. That necklace is mine, I said. She touched it. Dad said I could wear something meaningful. Father, seated in his chair, looked confused. I thought your mother gave that to both of you. My mother died before Maris moved into this house. The room went airless. My stepmother's face hardened. That was unnecessary. No, I said. It was accurate. Maris's fingers curled around the pendant. In my first life, I had lunged for it. She had cried that I cared more about jewelry than her future. Father had asked me to let it go. This time, I held out my hand. Take it off. She glanced at Father. He looked tired. Maris, perhaps choose another. Her mouth parted. It was a small thing, that hesitation in his voice, but I felt the shift. Not belief. Not yet. Just fatigue pressing against denial. He had seen the Northbridge note. He had seen my written objection. He had heard me say confidential board letter. A good man who avoids conflict can excuse one oddity. 3 begins to feel like a door he is holding shut with his body. Maris unclasped the necklace and placed it in my palm. The pendant was warm from her skin. I wiped it with a tissue before putting it away. Her eyes glistened. You always make everything ugly. No, I said. I just stopped decorating it. The next day, Northbridge's formal meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. Maris left at 8:45 with my stepmother, who insisted on driving her like a mother delivering a saint to martyrdom. Father remained home, pretending to read emails in his study. At 9:15, Professor Hales arrived at our gate. My father answered the door. I watched from the stairs as the two men faced each other. My father in a cardigan, unshaven from worry, Hales in an old charcoal suit, carrying a folder thick enough to bruise someone. Mr. Wren, Hales said, I'm here for Alara. My father's expression shifted. For the Northbridge matter? Yes. Is it serious? Professor Hales looked up at me before answering. Serious enough that your daughter should not walk into that building alone. For once, Father had no reply. In the car, Hales did not ask if I was all right. That was why I nearly cried. Instead, he said, "You have the original drafts?" "Yes." "Metadata exports?" "Yes." "Copy of the withdrawal objection?" "Yes." "Recording?" "Yes."
Good.
Speak only when asked. Answer only the question. Do not fill silences. Institutions use silence as a shovel. Don't climb into the hole for them. I looked out the window. I wish someone had taught me that earlier. So do I, he said. There was guilt in his voice. Not theatrical. Not useful yet, but real. In my first life, I had wanted everyone to feel guilty. I thought guilt would restore what they had taken. In my second, I understood guilt was only raw material. It had to be shaped into action or it's spoiled. Northbridge's boardroom overlooked the courtyard. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Long walnut table. Leather chairs. A portrait of the founder watching from the far wall, like a man prepared to be disappointed by women. When I entered with Professor Hales, Maris was already seated near the headmaster, smiling with both hands folded over her documents. My stepmother sat behind her, chin lifted. Vice Principal Lorne stood by the window, whispering to a woman I recognized from the board's website, Naomi Sato. She wore a slate gray suit and an expression that did not waste muscle. Maris saw me and laughed once. Not because anything was funny, because she needed the room to think my arrival was absurd. "Elara," she said warmly. "I didn't realize you were invited." Sato turned. "I invited Ms. Wren," she said. Maris's smile held, but the temperature dropped behind it. Headmaster Alcott cleared his throat. He was a broad, silver-bearded man who looked like he had practiced sympathy in mirrors. "This meeting is to resolve an administrative irregularity from yesterday's interview process and confirm appointment eligibility for the senior literature teacher post." Appointment eligibility. Not talent. Not passion. Not family feelings. Eligibility. Maris straightened. "I'm happy to clarify anything. Yesterday was confusing because my sister became overwhelmed." Professor Hales made a note without looking up. Sato said, "Ms. Vale, please refrain from characterizing another person's mental state. We are discussing documents." Maris flushed. My stepmother opened her mouth. Sato turned her eyes slightly. "Observers may not speak unless invited." My stepmother closed her mouth. I loved Naomi Sato a little in that moment. Headmaster Alcott gestured to Maris's folder. "Ms. Vale, you submitted a portfolio under the name Elara Wren yesterday. Is that correct?" Maris blinked.
No.
"I mean, the portfolio was originally Elara's framework, but we collaborated extensively." My first life self would have shouted. This time, I placed my hands in my lap and watched her choose the rope strand by strand. "Did you or did you not sign the candidate declaration under Ms. Wren's assigned interview slot?" Sato asked. "I signed where instructed." "Under what name?" Maris's eyes moved to Lorne. He looked away. "Ms. Vale," Sato said. "Wren," Maris admitted. "But only because the badge was wrong." The badge bore Ms. Wren's name because Ms. Wren was the shortlisted candidate. I was told the panel would consider me as an alternative. By whom? Another glance at Lorne. The room shifted. Lorne's face tightened. There had been informal discussions about a family substitution, given Ms. Wren's apparent reluctance. My apparent reluctance? I asked. Professor Hales put one finger on the table. A warning. Do not fill the silence. I stopped. Sato looked at me. "Ms. Wren, did you withdraw?"
No.
"Did you authorize Ms. Vale to present your portfolio as collaborative work?"
No.
"Did you authorize her to teach under your signed candidate name?"
No.
3 answers.
No tremor.
No speech.
No pleading.
Sato nodded once. Maris's voice rose, still soft but losing shape. "Elara is being technical. Families share things. She helped me prepare. She knew I needed this." "Need does not create authorization," Sato said. Headmaster Alcott shifted in his chair. Perhaps we can separate the portfolio issue from the appointment. Ms. Vale's demonstration was, despite some uneven moments, promising. If there was confusion about materials, we can request a fresh portfolio. There it was. The institutional instinct to save the convenient outcome. In my first life, that instinct destroyed me. Sato turned to him slowly. Headmaster, I advise you not to minimize an identity irregularity involving a candidate declaration. Alcott's beard moved as he swallowed. Maris sensed danger and changed tactics. I can teach another demonstration, she said quickly, with my own materials. Today, if needed.
You cannot, Sato said.
2 words. The room stopped. Maris frowned, almost amused. Excuse me? You cannot conduct another demonstration lesson. Why not? Sato opened the folder in front of her. Not dramatically. Not with a slap. She simply opened it, and every person in the room leaned toward the sound. Because your teaching license was revoked by board order effective 9 a.m. yesterday, following a confirmed finding of professional misconduct at Briarfield College. For half a second, Maris did not understand. Then the sentence reached her. Revoked. Effective 9 a.m. yesterday. Yesterday at 10:15, Maris had stood in a Northbridge classroom, wearing my candidate badge, teaching my lesson to live students after confirming her license was current and unrestricted. Her mouth opened. No sound came out. My stepmother stood. That's impossible. Sato did not look at her. Sit down. This is a mistake, Maris whispered. The appeal. So, you were aware of the proceeding? Sato asked. Maris froze. A trap does not always need bait. Sometimes it only needs a question. I mean, she stammered, I received something, but it wasn't final. It was final enough to restrict you from unsupervised teaching duties pending outcome, and final revocation took effect yesterday morning. You were notified by registered correspondence delivered to your address. My father's house. Our kitchen counter. The cream envelope. My stepmother's face drained, and I knew Maris had hidden more than the truth from me. Headmaster Alcott looked at Lorne. Did we verify her registration? Lorne adjusted his cuffs. The public register showed active status. The public register lags, Sato said. I requested documentation, Lorne replied. From whom? He did not answer. Maris suddenly began to cry. In the hallway, tears had made her look gentle. In the boardroom, with dates and signatures on the table, they looked like spilled ink. I didn't know, she said. I didn't understand. Alara never told me. There it was. The attempt to turn my silence into guilt. All eyes moved to me. In my first life, I would have explained everything at once. I would have defended myself until my voice cracked. I would have offered emotion where only evidence belonged. Sato spoke before I did. Ms. Wren had no obligation to advise you of your own board order. Maris flinched. I breathed. Sato continued. In fact, after submitting a safeguarding notice, Ms. Wren was specifically instructed not to interfere with the verification process. Maris looked at me with hatred so naked it almost felt honest. You knew, she said. I suspected. You let me go in. You chose to. You could have stopped me. I thought of my first life, of the hallway, of begging, of being called jealous, of losing every student I loved because I tried to stop a lie before it became official. No, I said quietly. I learned that I can't stop you from taking what isn't yours. I can only stop taking responsibility for what you do with it. For once, Maris had no rehearsed answer. Then Lorne made the mistake of trying to save himself. With respect, he said, Northbridge acted in good faith based on information available at the time. Sato lifted a second document. Did you receive an email from Ms. Wren yesterday morning requesting verification of identity and licensing before any candidate taught students? Lorne's mouth thinned. That email came very close to the interview time. Did you receive it? Yes. Did you open it before the demonstration lesson? I receive many emails. Sato looked at the page. The read receipt indicates it was opened at 9:42 a.m. Maris had entered the classroom at 10:15. Headmaster Alcott slowly turned toward his vice principal. Lauren's voice sharpened. It contained unverified allegations from a family member. It contained a safeguarding concern, Sato said, and specific notice that candidate identity may be compromised. You did not pause the lesson. I judged there was no immediate risk. You placed a revoked license individual in front of minors under another candidate's name after receiving a written warning. The sentence landed like a gavel. Lauren sat down. My stepmother whispered, Maris, tell them. Tell them it isn't true. Maris stared at the documents. Her tears had stopped. That was when I saw the real fear begin. Not fear of wrongdoing. Fear of consequence. Sato turned to me. Ms. Wren, please provide the authorship documents. I slid my folder across the table. Professor Hales added his own. I supervised Ms. Wren's literacy research project and can attest to the development timeline. The material presented yesterday is substantially hers. Maris laughed suddenly, sharp and ugly. Of course you're on her side. Everyone always thinks Alara is perfect. Professor Hales looked at her for the first time. No, he said. I think Alara is prepared. People often confuse the two when they have done neither. I looked down quickly so no one would see my mouth tremble. Headmaster Alcott called for a recess. Sato refused. This is not a negotiation, she said. It is a compliance intervention. Ms. Vale may not be appointed. Any offer extended is void. Any student assessment, attendance record, or instructional certification she touched yesterday must be reviewed and marked invalid. Northbridge will provide written notice to affected families. The board will open a separate inquiry into the school's verification failure. Every paper she touched. Voided. Not because I screamed. Because she signed. Maris stared at Sato. You can't do that. The board can and has. I'll appeal. You may. I'll sue. You may seek legal advice. My mother knows trustees. Sato closed the folder. The law does not become optional because you know people at dinner. If I had not been living inside the most important day of my life, I might have applauded. Instead, I watched the headmaster collapse inward. Northbridge's reputation was not merely bruised. It had been photographed, time-stamped, and placed in a compliance folder. Private schools could survive scandal. They could not survive appearing unsafe to parents who paid tuition for certainty. Alcott turned to me with a face full of delayed respect. Ms. Wren, he said, on behalf of Northbridge, I apologize for the confusion. I did not accept. Confusion was misplacing of form. This was a system choosing convenience until a regulator walked in. I would like the record to state that I did not withdraw, did not authorize use of my materials, and did not consent to Ms. Vale entering under my name. It will, Sato said. Alcott nodded quickly. Yes, of course. Maris pushed back her chair. You think this means you win? She asked me. The room went quiet. Her mother reached for her arm, but Maris shook her off. You think they'll love you now? Her voice cracked open, not with sadness, but with fury. They don't love you. They need someone clean because I got caught. That's all you are. The clean version of me. In my first life, that would have devastated me. In my second, I saw it for what it was, confession by comparison. I was never a version of you, I said. Her face twisted. Sato stood. Ms. Vale, this meeting is concluded for you. You will receive formal notice of further proceedings. Maris looked around the room, searching for someone still willing to pretend. Lauren examined the table. Alcott looked ill. Her mother was crying now, but not for me. Professor Hales watched with the sorrow of an educator seeing a student choose the wrong answer even after the lesson ended. No one saved her. So Maris did what she had always done when a room stopped rewarding her tears. She blamed me. This is because of the necklace, isn't it? She said. Because Dad loved me too. I almost stood. Professor Hales's hand moved slightly beside his folder. Stay seated. I stayed. No, I said. This is because you bribed parents, forged hours, stole materials, misrepresented your identity, and taught after your license was revoked. For the first time, I listed it without rage. The facts sounded stronger without my pain carrying them. Maris opened her mouth, then closed it. Sato nodded toward the door.
Now.
My stepmother rose with her daughter, shaking so badly her handbag slipped from her shoulder. As she passed me, she whispered, "You destroyed her."
No, I said.
I stopped lending her my name. After they left, the boardroom felt larger. Headmaster Alcott removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Ms. Wren, this has been deeply unfortunate." "Unfortunate for whom?" I asked. He had no clean answer. Sato saved him from inventing one. "Headmaster, there remains the matter of the vacant post and Ms. Wren's interrupted candidacy." Alcott brightened with relief, because hiring me now looked like atonement without the inconvenience of reform.
Yes.
"Ms. Wren, given the circumstances, we would be pleased to offer you a new interview opportunity this afternoon." In my first life, I would have accepted instantly. I had wanted Northbridge so badly, I mistook its gates for a future. Now I looked through the windows at students crossing the courtyard. They deserved good teaching. They also deserved adults who verified who was standing in front of them. "I will interview," I said, "under conditions." Alcott blinked. "Conditions?" "Yes." Professor Hales hid a smile. "First," I said, "the panel must be reconstituted without Vice Principal Lorne." Lorne's head snapped up. "Excuse me?" "Second, Northbridge will provide written acknowledgement that my original candidacy was obstructed by identity misrepresentation and administrative failure, not personal withdrawal. Third, the school will report the incident to affected parents in language approved by the board. Fourth, if appointed, I want independent control over the literacy support program I proposed, including budget transparency and accessibility provisions. Fifth, any future reference written about me will reflect this record accurately." Alcott stared as if candidates were not supposed to have spines. Sato's expression did not change, but her pen stopped moving for a fraction of a second. "Those are substantial requests," Alcott said. "They are proportionate to substantial failure." Lorne stood. "This is absurd. She is leveraging a family dispute into institutional demands." Sato looked at him. "Sit down, Mr. Lorne." He sat. Alcott asked for 10 minutes. This time, Sato allowed it. While he and Lorne stepped aside to speak near the window, Professor Hales leaned toward me. "You've changed," he said softly. "I had to."
"I'm sorry."
I looked at him. "For what?" "For not seeing enough the first time you came to me." My breath caught. He did not know what he was apologizing for. Not really. But some part of my old grief heard it anyway. "You couldn't have known," I said. "I knew you were gifted. I knew you were often surrounded by people who benefited from your work. I should have watched more carefully. There are apologies that ask you to comfort the person giving them. This was not one." So I simply nodded. When Alcott returned, his voice had acquired the humility of a man standing at the edge of a lawsuit. "Northbridge agrees to your first 3 conditions immediately. The 4th may be negotiated if you are appointed. The 5th is reasonable."
"Not negotiated," I said.
"Defined." His smile strained. "Defined, then." Sato closed her folder. "The board will observe the revised process." Lorne's mouth went white. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt tired. Revenge stories make justice look like lightning. In reality, justice is paperwork with a pulse. It requires signatures, copies, patient questions, the discipline not to throw your grief onto the table where dishonest people can call it mess. My revised interview took place at 2 p.m. in the same classroom Maris had used the day before. The students did not know everything. They knew only that another candidate would teach a second lesson. They looked curious, restless, mildly annoyed at being used twice for adult decisions.
"Fair."
I stood at the front with my own name badge clipped to my jacket. For one moment, the room blurred. In my first life, I never got to teach this lesson. I only heard pieces of it through glass while someone else wore my name. Now, 24 students looked at me, waiting. I placed a blank sheet of paper on the visualizer. "Today," I said, We're going to talk about the difference between a missing fact and a hidden one. A few heads lifted.
Good.
A missing fact is something the narrator does not know. A hidden fact is something the narrator knows and chooses not to give you yet. Your job as readers is not to panic when information is missing. Your job is to ask, who benefits from the silence? The boy who had challenged Maris yesterday leaned forward. I recognized him by his voice when he spoke. So silence can be evidence? Yes, I said, but only if we read the context carefully. Then I taught. Not performed. Not proved.
Taught.
I asked questions and followed answers. I changed pathways when the class found a better one. I let a quiet student write before speaking. I gave the restless student a role tracking contradictions on the board. I modified the worksheet for a girl who whispered that boxes stressed her out because she hated choosing where ideas belonged. We turned the narrator inside out without humiliating the character or each other. Halfway through, the same boy said, "Yesterday the worksheet felt like it had one answer." The room froze because students are brave in ways adults punish when embarrassed. I said, "Then yesterday the worksheet was used badly." Behind the glass, someone shifted. I continued, "A good tool can still fail if the person holding it does not know what it is for." The boy grinned. By the end of the lesson, the board was covered in student evidence. Not my performance. Their thinking. That had always been the point. When the students left, one girl paused at the door. "Miss?" "Yes. Are you the real one?" The question should have hurt. Instead, I smiled. "I am Alara Wren," I said. "And yes, I wrote the lesson." She nodded like that mattered.
It did.
The panel offered me the post before sunset. I did not accept until the contract included every condition in writing. That night, I returned home to find my father alone in the kitchen. The house smelled of untouched dinner. My stepmother and Maris were gone. Their absence was not peace yet, just a room after a storm. Father stood when I entered. He looked older than he had that morning. "Ilara," he said. I placed my contract folder on the table. "I got the post." His face crumpled with relief. "That's wonderful." I waited. He seemed to understand that wonderful was too small to cover what had happened. "I'm sorry," he said. The words were quiet. In my first life, I had begged for those words until they became meaningless in my imagination. Now that they were here, I did not know where to put them. "For what?" I asked because I had learned to make people be specific. He swallowed. "For not believing you. For asking you to stay calm when I should have asked why you were upset. For letting Maris take things from you because it was easier to call you difficult than call her wrong." I gripped the back of a chair. A ruined childhood does not heal because a parent finally names the wound. But naming is better than silence. "Why?" I asked. He looked down. "After your mother died, I thought peace meant nobody crying. Maris cried more easily. You explained. I mistook tears for need and explanations for resistance." It was the most honest thing he had ever said to me. It was also not enough. "I can't fix this for you tonight," I said. "I know. I'm not going to pretend because you're sorry. I know. I need space from this house." Pain crossed his face, but he nodded. "I'll help you move." That surprised me more than the apology. I laughed once, tired and almost young. "You hate carrying boxes." "I deserve boxes." For the first time in years, I saw my father not as the man who failed me or the man I wanted him to be, but as a man standing between those two versions with no shortcut to either side. Maris did not disappear quietly. People like her rarely do. 2 days after Northbridge voided her appointment, an anonymous post appeared in a local parents' forum claiming I had sabotaged a disadvantaged young teacher out of jealousy. The post included a cropped photo of me from university, a paragraph about family rivalry, and the phrase, "weaponized bureaucracy," which sounded exactly like something Maris would consider clever. In my first life, I would have responded myself. This time, I sent it to Sato, Northbridge's legal office, and Professor Hales. By evening, Northbridge released its official statement. It did not name Maris, but it confirmed that a candidate had been disqualified for licensing ineligibility and misrepresentation, that another candidate's materials had been used without authorization, and that the board was overseeing corrective action. It also confirmed my appointment as senior literature teacher and founding coordinator of the Ren Literacy Initiative.
Ren.
My name, printed correctly. Maris called me 37 times that night. I answered on the 38th, with the call recording notice active. "You ruined my life," she said. Her voice was raw, no sugar left.
No, irraplia.
The board revoked your license because of what you did at Briarfield. You reported me. I reported a safeguarding concern. You knew Northbridge was my last chance. It was never your chance. It was my interview. She laughed, bitter and broken. You think you're better than me because you follow rules?
No.
I think rules are what people like you call unfair when they finally apply to you. You always had everything. There it was again, the mythology of her hunger. I had a mother who died when I was 11, I said. I had a father who confused your tears with truth. I had work you stole and years you nearly destroyed. Stop calling other people's losses your deprivation. Silence. For a moment, I thought she might say something real. Instead, she whispered, "Dad will forgive me." Maybe. He'll forgive Mum too. Maybe. And when he does, you'll be alone. In my first life, that threat would have terrified me because loneliness had felt like proof I was unloved. Now I looked around my half-packed room, contract on the desk, lesson notes in neat stacks, necklace safely returned to its box, Professor Hales's message blinking on my laptop, a calendar invite from Northbridge's literacy team waiting for acceptance. Alone was no longer the worst outcome. Being surrounded by people who required my erasure was. Then I'll be alone with my own name, I said. I ended the call. My first week at Northbridge began with an assembly. Not the kind that celebrates excellence with brass music and empty slogans. A compliance assembly. The students were told that adults had failed to follow verification procedures, that their safety mattered more than reputation, and that the school would be implementing stricter identity and license checks for every staff member and contractor. Headmaster Alcott spoke stiffly, but he spoke. Sato sat in the front row like a conscience in human form. Then I was introduced. I walked onto the stage under lights that in my first life had shone on Maris. For one strange second, I saw both timelines at once. Maris smiling in my place, students applauding a lie, me watching online months later from a dark apartment with my license suspended, and my life narrowed to one screen. Then the image dissolved. The applause in this life was polite, uncertain, real. I did not give a speech about triumph. I did not mention my sister. I looked at the students and said, "My job is not to make you sound clever. My job is to help you think clearly enough that no one can use confusion against you." A few teachers looked surprised.
Good.
The Ren Literacy Initiative started small, 12 students, 2 afternoons a week, one room with windows that stuck when it rained. I had asked for budget transparency, but budgets do not become generous because contracts demand honesty. The first month was still glue sticks, borrowed laptops, and me carrying crates of secondhand novels from my apartment. But this time, every hour counted under my name. Every lesson plan stayed in my drive. Every student note was backed up. Every meeting summary went to the right people. Prepared did not mean paranoid. It meant I had stopped assuming integrity would protect itself. The students taught me how to live in the aftermath. One boy wrote an essay comparing unreliable narration to adults who say miscommunication when they mean lie. A girl who hated boxes created a mind map so good I asked her permission to use it as a sample. Another student, quiet for 6 weeks, stayed behind one afternoon and said, "Miss Wren, did someone ever take credit for your work?"
I paused.
"Yes," I said. "What did you do?" "I learned how to keep receipts." He nodded seriously. "My cousin takes my drawings, then sign them, date them, photograph them, and keep drawing." He smiled. That was the part revenge never shows. The life after the villain falls, when you still have to teach Tuesday period 3, answer emails, fix the jammed printer, and remind a student that a thesis is not just a vibe with punctuation. It was ordinary. It was everything. Months passed. The board's investigation into Maris became formal. Briarfield's grade bribery scheme widened. 2 parents admitted payments. 1 administrator resigned. Lauren left Northbridge to pursue consultancy opportunities, which is how schools describe men escorted out by consequences. My stepmother moved with Maris into her sister's townhouse and sent my father long messages about betrayal, blood, and how daughters should not weaponize institutions against family. Father forwarded none of them to me. That, more than any apology, showed effort. We had dinner every second Sunday at a quiet restaurant halfway between my apartment and his house. At first, conversation limped. He asked about work. I answered. He asked whether I needed anything. I said no. He did not ask me to call Maris. He did not ask me to forgive. Slowly, the absence of pressure became its own language. One Sunday, he brought the old wooden box that had belonged to my mother. I found more of her things, he said. Inside were fountain pens, postcards, a scarf that still faintly smelled of cedar, and a letter addressed to me for my 25th birthday. In my first life, I never received it. My stepmother had claimed she could not find any of my mother's papers. I unfolded the letter with careful hands. My mother's handwriting curved across the page, elegant and strong. My dearest Alara, if your life has taught you to be gentle, I am proud. If it has taught you to be sharp, I am also proud. A blade is not cruel because it has an edge. It depends what you cut free. I cried in the restaurant. Not elegantly. Not quietly enough. My father did not tell me to calm down. He handed me a napkin and cried too. Maris's final hearing took place 6 months after Northbridge. I was asked to provide testimony regarding the identity misrepresentation and portfolio theft. I did not want to see her, but wanting had become less important than finishing things properly. The hearing room was smaller than I expected. Plain walls, long table, water pitchers. No drama, no audience, no stage for Maris to dominate. Just professionals with files and tired eyes. Maris looked different, not humbled. I will not lie and say disgrace made her wise. She looked thinner, harder, stripped of softness because softness had been a tool and tools are abandoned when they stop working. Her hair was pulled back severely. Her makeup was minimal. She did not look at me when I entered. When asked whether she had knowingly presented my materials, she said, I believed we had a family understanding. When asked whether she had confirmed her license as unrestricted after receiving revocation notice, she said, I was under emotional distress. When asked whether she had accepted money for grade changes at Briarfield, she said, the parents misunderstood the nature of private tutoring. Every answer tried to turn action into atmosphere. Then the panel played my hallway recording. Maris's voice filled the room. Once I go in, I can't undo it. She closed her eyes. They played the classroom declaration. I confirm. They displayed the email warning opened by Lauren before the demonstration. They displayed my withdrawal objection. They displayed my lesson drafts. They displayed the board revocation timestamp. No one raised their voice.
No one needed to.
Facts, arranged correctly, can be louder than outrage. When it was my turn, I answered as Professor Hales had taught me. Yes.
No.
I did not authorize. I was present. I reported a concern. I did not warn Ms. Vale because compliance instructed me not to interfere. At the end, Maris finally looked at me. Her eyes were red, but dry. You enjoyed it, she said. The panel chair warned her not to address me. I answered anyway because this was the last thing I would give her. No, I said. I survived it. Her face changed, just slightly. Perhaps she understood for 1 second that I was not standing there because revenge had made me happy. I was standing there because truth had to be completed even when happiness was not part of the procedure. Or perhaps she understood nothing. Either way, the panel revoked her license permanently for serious professional misconduct, fraud, and breach of student trust. She could reapply after 7 years, but only with evidence of rehabilitation and after completing ethics review. Knowing Maris, she would call that exile. Knowing my students, I called it safety. The strangest consequence came not from Maris, but from the teachers who had watched the scandal and learned the wrong lesson. For weeks, people treated me like glass with a lawsuit inside it. The history teacher apologized when he borrowed a stapler. The science coordinator sent meeting notes in triplicate. A junior English teacher named Nia knocked on my door one afternoon and asked, with terrible seriousness, whether she should copyright her lesson slides before sharing them with the department. I told her to sit down. She sat as if I were about to reveal a legal code carved into stone. Protecting your work matters, I said, but fear is not a professional system. We need shared folders with version history, clear attribution, and meeting minutes. We need boundaries, not bunkers. She looked relieved enough to laugh. So, I don't need to watermark every Macbeth slide? Only if Macbeth starts applying for your job. That became the first real policy I helped write at Northbridge. Not a revenge policy, not a suspicion policy, but an authorship and collaboration protocol. Every shared resource had an owner, contributor notes, revision dates, and usage permissions. At first, a few senior staff rolled their eyes. Then one of them misplaced a unit plan and found the original in 30 seconds because of the system, and suddenly my so-called paranoia became innovation. That was another thing I learned. When people benefit from a boundary, they rename it wisdom. The students noticed too. They always do. They noticed that I credited whoever made the anchor chart. They noticed that I said, Jasmine's question helped us see this, or Rafi's interpretation is leading today's discussion. They noticed that work could belong to someone without making the room selfish. Slowly, my classroom became a place where credit was not a prize thrown to the loudest person, but a light pointed toward the right hands. One Friday, after a long week of rain and practice essays, I found a sticky note on my desk. No name. Just one sentence written in purple pen. Thank you for making it matter who thought of things. I kept that note in the drawer beside my contract. The contract proved I had won the post. The note proved why I wanted it. On the anniversary of the day I was reborn, Northbridge held its winter showcase. The Ren Literacy Initiative had grown from 12 students to 46. Our reading lab had new software. Our student mentors ran peer workshops. The boy whose cousin stole his drawings designed the program logo, signed and dated in the bottom corner. The girl who hated boxes spoke on stage about alternative note-taking systems and received louder applause than the headmaster. I stood backstage holding cue cards I did not need, watching students become more themselves under lights that had once terrified me. Professor Hales joined me near the curtain. Proud, he asked. Yes. Of them? Mostly. And of yourself? That question still felt dangerous. In my first life, pride had been used against me. Every achievement became proof I could afford to lose things. Every confidence became arrogance if Maris wanted it. Every wound became drama because strong girls are expected to absorb impact quietly. I looked at the stage, at the students, at my name printed correctly on the program. Yes, I said. Of myself too. He smiled. Good. After the showcase, a parent approached me. Her son had entered the program reading 2 years below level and now argued about symbolism with the confidence of a tiny barrister. I don't know what you did, she said, gripping my hands, but he reads at breakfast now. What I did was not magical. I showed up. I planned carefully. I listened. I refused to let a student's difficulty become their identity. I protected my work, so I could keep doing it, but I smiled and said, he did the hard part. That night, after everyone left, I returned to my classroom alone. The board still held fragments of the showcase schedule. A stack of essays waited on my desk. Rain tapped against the windows. The room smelled like paper, dust, and dry erase markers. I sat in the front row, where a student might sit, and looked at the teacher's desk. In my first life, I thought justice meant getting back exactly what was taken. The post, the reputation, the applause, the years. But years do not return. Neither do first versions of trust. The woman who woke in the hallway outside Northbridge was not the woman who had died in a cold apartment, and she was not the woman who once believed talent would protect her from theft. She was sharper, quieter, better documented. Maybe that sounded sad. It wasn't. A blade is not cruel because it has an edge. It depends what you cut free. I had cut myself free from Maris, from my stepmother's accusations, from my father's silence, from Northbridge's polished excuses, from the need to be believed by people who profited from doubt. The classroom door opened. The girl who once asked if I was the real one peeked in. "Miss Wren? They're taking photos in the hall. They want you." I stood. "Coming." She lingered. "Can I ask something?" "Always." "When you taught us about hidden facts, did you already know the ending?" I thought of the board letter, the stolen badge, Maris walking into the classroom under my name, Sato opening the folder, the contract, the hearing, the students on stage. "No," I said. I knew the truth. The ending still had to be written. She considered that, then nodded as if filing it somewhere important. In the hall, the students crowded around the program banner. Someone had pinned the Wren Literacy logo slightly crooked. The headmaster waved me into the center. Professor Hales stood to one side. My father waited near the back, holding flowers he had probably bought too early because the petals were slightly bruised. For 1 second before joining them, I looked down at my badge. Elara Wren, Senior Literature Teacher. My name, my post, my life. Then I stepped into the photograph.